Hello, and welcome to the training on the Legal Assistance for Victims Grant Program's Semi-Annual Progress Report. Throughout this training, I will refer to the Legal Assistance for Victims Grant Program as the LAV program. Before I begin, I just want to provide a reminder of when the reporting forms are due. The reporting forms are due 30 days after the end of the reporting period. So the January to June reporting periods form is due July 30th, and the July to December reporting form is due January 30th. Thank you for accessing our recording. We hope that this training enables you to provide the most detailed and accurate reporting of your grant-funded work on your semi-annual progress report. Accurate data reporting is important for many reasons. Your quantitative and qualitative data enables VAWA's effectiveness to be measured. VAWA MEI creates reports for OVW using your data and data from grantees across the country. These summary data reports support OVW to make requests for increased appropriations and to defend VAWA funding to decision makers. Your data also helps OVW to make sure federal funds are being spent appropriately and to measure the performance of grant programs. Additionally, every 2 years, the Attorney General is required to submit a report to Congress on the overall effectiveness of VAWA funding. VAWA grantee data makes up a significant part of that mandated report. The more consistently grantees fill out their reports, the more accurately VAWA's effectiveness can be measured. Here are a few tips before we look at the progress reporting form page by page. We ask that you please read the separate instructions you have downloaded with the progress reporting form. There are many helpful examples in there to assist you in filling out the reporting form. Throughout this form, there are other categories listed for many questions. In general, we ask that you use the other category only if you can't find a way to put the information into a category that already exists and is a close fit. When we aggregate data for reports, often responses in the other category will not get included. There are some cases where other really is the only option to accurately capture what you are reporting. That is fine. We just ask that you take the time to rule out all other options first. Additionally, if you do not have an other to report, leave the box blank. Please do not report NA, not yet, or anything like that. Following most sections of the form, you will find optional narrative questions. Use these sections to talk about the unique successes of your grant-funded activities. Talk about the impact grant-funded activities have made on your community or for survivors. These questions exist at the end of each section so that you can provide more detail about the work being done in each area that the hard data does not capture on its own. We encourage you to report in the optional narrative questions as to help your program most accurately capture the work you are doing with grant funds. We also ask that you try not to use acronyms or abbreviations in your data. If you do, please provide an explanation of what the acronym means in each question you use it. Do not send attachments or extra documents containing data that is asked for in the report. Only data that is contained in the reporting form itself will be received and analyzed by Muskie's VAWA MEI team. And lastly, give us a call, send us an email. We're here to help you, and we'll gladly walk through any questions you have and help you successfully fill out your reporting form. Section A1, Grant Information. So question 1, date of report, you will enter the date of the report when you submit it into GMS. Questions 2 through 4 will be pre-populated for you when you download your form from GMS. You'll notice throughout the reporting form there are these little question mark icons next to the numbers. If you click on that question mark icon, it will pull up the specific instructions and or examples for that question to help you fill it out. So as you're going through the form, if you have any questions, that is a resource for you. Question number 5 is where you indicate the type of grantee organization. Question 5A is where you indicate whether or not you are a faith-based organization. Question 6 is the point of contact. So for this question, you should provide contact information for the person who knows the most about the day-to-day activities funded by your LAV grant. This is the person that we will contact if we have any questions about your data. Question 7, tribal populations. Here you would answer yes if your program's intention is to focus on specific tribes or nations and have provided targeted services that are specific to tribal members within your grant project. If you indicate yes, please list the specific tribal populations you serve. Question 8, percentage of funds directed to each area, is where you report the areas addressed by your LAV program grant during the current reporting period and estimate the approximate percentage of funds or resources committed to each area. When determining the percentage, take into account the number of cases or clients, the amount of time you spent on those types of cases, the type of representation and services you provided, and the source of referral. The total of this section must equal 100. Section A2, staff information. So when you are reporting staff, only report FTEs for staff whose salary is provided fully or partially with grant funds. You should include staff time that is contracted work as well. Report by activity rather than job title. If staff members fall into 2 or more categories based on their functions, divide FTEs among the applicable categories. Time should be prorated if necessary. This would occur, for example, when someone is part-time, was hired partway through the grant period, is a contractor, or is full-time but only partially funded by LAV program funds. You report to the second decimal place. And lastly, please use the other category sparingly. For the most part, all activities performed by staff are included in the listed categories. If you do use the other, please be specific, and in the other descriptor, correlate each entry with an FTE amount. This is the FTE cheat sheet. So this slide shows some examples to help you calculate FTEs for a 40-hour full-time work week. FTEs should be based on the 26-week or 6-month reporting period that is just ending. So in 6 months, there are 1,040 working hours. To calculate FTEs, you would take the hours worked in the 6-month reporting period and divide by 1,040. I'll go through a few examples to help demonstrate how to calculate FTEs. So example number 1. Your grant funds are used to fund one full-time victim advocate whose salary is 35% funded by the grant and another full-time victim advocate whose salary is 50% funded by the grant. In this case, you would report only the percent of salary that is grant funded. The correct FTE under victim advocate would be 0.58, which is 35% plus 50%. Example number 2. Your grant funds a full-time administrator who spent 10 hours a week performing administrative functions, 20 hours a week supervising other LAV-funded attorneys, and 10 hours a week training volunteer law students. In this case, you would divide staff time by function. So the correct FTE under administrator would be 0.25, and also the correct FTE under a trainer would be 0.25. That's because this staff person worked 10 hours a week performing each of these functions, and 10 hours divided by 40 hours equals 0.25. Lastly, you would report 0.5 FTEs under attorney as the attorney, as they were supervising an LAV-funded attorney 20 hours a week. So 20 divided by 40 equals 0.5. Example number 3. The grant funded a full-time legal advocate who was hired 3 months into the reporting period. In this case, you would need to prorate the FTE to reflect 3 months of the 6-month reporting period. The correct FTE under legal advocate would be 0.5, which is the 3 months divided by 6 months. Section B, purpose areas. For question 10, you check all the purpose areas that apply to activities engaged in with LAV program funds during the current reporting period. The first purpose area generally applies to legal services organizations. The second generally applies to victim services organizations. Question 11, program priority areas. This is where you indicate program priority areas addressed by your LAV program grant. Some years, OVW will include priority areas in their solicitations. If you're unclear about what your program priority areas are, refer back to the solicitation under which you applied and/or your grant proposal. I want to note quickly that the third purpose area on this form in question number 10 is outdated for those of you who have 2014 and post-2014 LAV grants. Those of you with 2014 and post-2014 grants can no longer have training or technical assistance as a purpose area for your grant. Section C1, training. Training is defined as activities for professionals or volunteers acting in the role of a professional to improve their response to victim survivors as it relates to their role in the system. So you should complete this section if grant funds directly supported the training of non-grant funded people who are professionals or volunteers acting in the role of a professional. Do not count staff development of grant-funded staff or community education in this section. So, if you used LAV funds for training, you would choose yes, then answer questions 12, which is the number of training events, question 13, which is the number of people trained, and question 14, training content areas. To help get you thinking about how to report in training, I have an example for you. Grant funds supported 8 training events for professionals this reporting period. 3 training events provided by other funds also took place. 135 professionals attended the grant-funded training events. So, in number 12, you would report the 8 training events that were grant-funded and not the other 3 that were funded by other funds. And then in number 13, you would fill out the 135 professionals that attended those grant-funded training events. So in our example, there were 14 attorneys that attended the training events, 12 domestic violence coalition staff, 15 health professionals, and so on and so forth to equal 135 here. Then you would go on to question 14 and indicate which content areas you trained on just by clicking the box. You would fill out all that apply. And then lastly, in the training section, this is Question number 15 is one of those optional additional information questions. So here you can provide any additional information that is not already captured in questions 12 through 14. Section C2, Coordinated Community Response. So CCR provides a picture of the relationships that you have with other agencies and organizations within your community and the frequency with which you interact with them. So for purposes of this question, you should include all agencies and organizations that you have contact with, not just the ones you consider partner agencies. CCR activities must be within the scope of your grant program. So even if grant-funded staff are not participating in CCR activities, but the activities occur within the scope of your grant program, you should report those activities in this section. So for question 16, you would report the frequency with which you receive or give referrals, consultations, and technical assistance to the agencies and organizations listed in the first column. You would then also indicate the frequency with which you have meetings with the agencies listed in the first column. And then lastly, you would indicate which of the agencies and organizations in the first column, which ones you have a memorandum of understanding with. Question 17 is another optional additional information question. Section C3, Products. If LAV funds were used to develop, substantially revise, or distribute products during the current reporting period, you would complete the section. So in question 18, you would enter the number developed or revised, which is usually 1, the title or topic area, intended audience, the number used, not the number printed, and if it was produced in another language, you would identify those languages in the other languages category, or leave it blank if not. If you did not develop or revise a product in that reporting period, but distributed it, fill everything out except the number developed or revised. Likewise, if you just developed it but did not distribute it yet, fill out everything except number used or distributed. Section C4, Technical Assistance. If LAV program funds were used to provide TA during the current reporting period, you would check yes and then answer question number 19. In number 19, indicate the areas of technical assistance and the type of the recipient. You would check all that apply. Section C5, Data Collection. For this section, you would indicate yes if LAV program funds were used to develop, install, expand, or coordinate data collection systems during the current reporting period. For question 20, you report the use of LAV program funds for data collection in communication systems. You should go through the list and check all that apply. Only indicate the activities that were engaged in with grant funds during the current reporting period. For example, if you used LAV funds to develop a data collection system in a previous reporting period, even though you continued to use them in the current reporting period, you would not report them again. Section D, Victim Services, Legal Services. If LAV program funds were used to provide victim services and/or legal services to victim survivors during the current reporting period, you would mark yes and then fill out questions 21 through 31. Question 21 is where you report number of victims served, partially served, and not served during the current reporting period. Question 22 is where you indicate the reasons why victim survivors seeking services were either not served or were partially served. Question 23 is where you report the victims and survivors' demographic information. 24 is where you report their relationship to offender by victimization type. 25 is where you report the victim services provided by lawyers. And 26 is where you report victim services provided by other staff. I'll go back to the first question and talk in more detail about how to fill out this section. So, some tips for filling out the victim services section. It's important for all of you to know that most of the data requested in the victim services section is congressionally mandated. So Congress wants to know how many of the number of victim survivors seeking services were served and how many could not be served. So please provide information in this section that represents only those victims and survivors served and services provided with LAV program funding. So when you're considering reporting a victim or survivor in this section, you should think about these three questions. What services did the victim request or accept? What services are you funded to provide under your LAV grant? And is the person a primary victim of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking? For a victim survivor to be counted in this section, they need to have requested or accepted services before you can count them. They needed to request grant-funded services, and they must be a primary victim of sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, or stalking to be counted on this form. When determining if a victim survivor has been served, partially served, or not served, it's important to know the difference between those three categories. So you would count a victim as served if they requested grant-funded services and your program was able to provide all of those grant-funded services to them. You would count a victim as partially served if they requested grant-funded services, but because of programmatic issues such as those listed in question number 22, your program could not provide all of the grant-funded services they requested. And you would count a victim as not served if your program could not provide any of the grant-funded services the victim requested due to programmatic issues such as those listed in question 22. Before we move on, I want to take a moment to talk about partially served and not served victims and survivors. We find that grantees are often worried about reporting victims as partially served or not served because they fear it will appear that they are not meeting their goals and objectives, or it will shed a negative light on their program. However, by reporting victims as partially served or not served, grantees are helping OVW and decision policymakers understand the scope and burden of violence that stretches far beyond what VAWA is able to fund. OVW knows that VAWA funding is not enough to support every victim who requests services from grantees. Therefore, we want to encourage you all to carefully track and report victim and legal services information using both the quantitative data and the narrative data to highlight instances of partial or non-service. Narrative data can highlight long waiting lists for services or a program's inability to support victims on family court days. Detailed data can help show the great need for services that exist. So, who is not counted at all in this form? Those seeking only services that are not funded with LAV program grant funds, those who do not accept any of the grant-funded services that were offered or recommended, and those who are not primary victims of sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, or stalking. When reporting in question number 21, you need to provide an unduplicated count. So victims reported are an unduplicated count and should be counted only once per reporting period. However, they can be counted in each reporting period they are served. So, for example, a victim received safety planning at the beginning of the reporting period. They also came back at the end of the reporting period and requested non-attorney legal advocacy. They should be reported only once in question number 21, and then should be counted once under each service that was provided. Additionally, just remember that you want to report victims each and every reporting period that you serve them. So if you provide services to a victim from March through November, you would report that person in the January to June reporting form, as well as the July to December. And then lastly, for this question, you need to report the victims under their primary victimization, even if a victim has experienced more than one type of victimization. So in determining a primary victimization, you may want to consider the victimization that led the victim survivor to seek services. You might also want to consider the referral source, whether it was a sexual assault or domestic violence agency, or the types of services the victim survivor received. So to help you think through how to report in this question, I have a few examples to go through. Example 1. A victim of domestic violence calls your program looking for support services and assistance with a protection order. Both services are funded by your LAV grant. You provide support services, and your LAV-funded attorney assists her in obtaining a protection order in the current reporting period. So in this case, the victim received all services she requested that you are funded to provide under your grant. So this victim should be counted as served under the domestic violence, dating violence column in question number 21. Example number 2. A victim of domestic violence calls your legal services program and requests assistance with a protection order and divorce. A non-LAV-funded legal advocate conducts the intake and assists the victim in obtaining a temporary protection order. The advocate places this victim survivor on the LAV-funded attorney's waiting list to aid with the divorce. By the end of the reporting period, the LAV-funded attorney still had not met with this victim survivor. This victim survivor should be reported as not served in the domestic violence column. This is because she did not receive any of the LAV-funded services she had requested by the end of the reporting period from LAV-funded staff and was put on a waiting list. Although she did receive services within your program, they were not provided by LAV-funded staff and should not be counted on this reporting form. Because she was provided services under another funding source, those services would not be considered when determining how to report her in this question. Example number 3. A woman is sexually assaulted and a police officer who responded to the incident has called your program's hotline on behalf of the victim asking if an advocate will accompany her to the hospital during her examination. This is not a service funded by your LAV grant. You connect the police officer with a local agency that does provide the service. In this case, the service requested is not grant funded, so this victim should not be counted at all in the victim services section. So before we get into the legal services part of this section, just a quick reminder, 21 is where you report the victims served, partially served, and not served. 22 is where you list out the reasons victims and survivors were not served or were partially served. Question 23 is demographics. 24 is where you report the relationship to offender. 25 is where you report victim services provided by lawyers. And 26 is where you report victim services provided by other staff. Okay, so the rest of the questions in this section pertain to the legal issues and outcomes for the services you provided to the victim survivors reported in question number 21. Question 27 is where you report the legal issues addressed during the current reporting period. Question 28 down here at the bottom is where you report the number of victim survivors who received assistance with multiple legal issues. Question 29 is a narrative question where you can provide more detail around the legal issues that were addressed. Question 30 is where you report the legal outcomes for the legal issues reported in question 27. And question 31 is the optional additional information question. So when you're reporting in these questions, specifically in question 27, you report the new and pending matters in which legal issues were addressed by LAV-funded staff during the current reporting period. So a pending matter is one that was already opened at the beginning of the reporting period, and a new matter is one that was opened during the reporting period. You must choose to report a victim survivor in either pending or new for each individual legal issue that applies. So, since you can only report a victim survivor once in each legal issue category, you must choose to report them in either pending or new if you have addressed both a pending and new issue on behalf of the victim survivor in the same reporting period. The total pending and new matters in each individual issue category should not be greater than the total victims served that you reported in question 21A and B. So some more tips on reporting legal issues. In this question, count each victim survivor once in each individual legal issue category for which they received LAV-funded assistance, to count them in all categories of legal issues that were addressed. You should not be reporting victim survivors by only their primary issue. Instead, report all of the legal issues that you addressed on their behalf during the current reporting period. Include issues addressed by victim advocates and legal advocates, but only if the issues were legal in nature. So protection orders, for instance, or income maintenance, evictions, criminal case information. If the advocate is informing the victim about resources, referring the victim to public housing, to an agency to apply for example, food stamps or anything like that, that is victim advocacy, and that's not addressing legal issues. So therefore, those activities should not be reported in question 27. You may use question number 39 to provide more specific information about other immigration and other family matters you are addressing in this question. That is categories here and here. If you do report in question number 39 about those other services, please include the number of victim survivors receiving assistance in parentheses after each legal issue listed. There is an other category in this question, so again, just remember to think carefully before using the general other category. Ask yourself if there is an existing category you can use that is similar enough, even if not exact. That will save you time later when you may be asked by us to reclassify your response in the other category. An example of an appropriate other to use there, which has been recommended by OVW, is crime victim compensation claim. If you provide assistance to a victim in this administrative process, You would report that in other. Additional others that would be appropriate include probate matters, such as wills and name changes, and healthcare access. So to help you think about filling out this question, I have a couple examples. So example number 1. Your LAV-funded legal advocate assisted 25 victims in obtaining protection orders during the current reporting period. 3 of the protection order cases were carried over from the previous reporting period due to continued hearings, and 22 were new hearings. So in this case, you would report 3 under pending and 22 under new in question 27A, protection orders. Example number 2. During the current reporting period, 2 domestic violence victims requested assistance with divorcing their abusive spouses. In one case, your LAV-funded attorney filed a divorce complaint with no other issues. In the other case, the attorney filed a divorce complaint and also obtained temporary family court orders addressing custody, visitation, and child support. So in this case, you report the following in the new column. You would report 2 in question 27B, family law matters, and then under divorce, you would report 2. You would report 1 in custody visitation and 1 in child/spousal support. It's important to note that the B, family law matters category, is not a total for the I through V subcategories. This category, as in category B, is supposed to be an unduplicated count of victims receiving assistance in one or more of the subcategories. This is also true for G, immigration matters. So again, moving down the form, question 28 is where you report the number of victim survivors who received assistance with multiple legal issues. And 29, which I skipped over, is a narrative question. And then you come to question 30, legal outcomes. Question 30 is used to report legal outcomes for cases that were closed or for specific issues or matters that were resolved during the current reporting period. You report here only the outcomes of cases in which services were provided by LAV-funded attorneys, paralegals, or specially certified immigration representatives or tribal court advocates. You would not report in this question, for example, if a legal advocate assisted a victim with filing out the paperwork for an ex parte protection order. However, if an attorney or paralegal working under the supervision of an attorney provided similar assistance, you would count that here. Report only the highest level of service or outcome achieved for each issue, and report the outcomes for all issues. We strongly advise that you read through the definitions of these outcome categories on page 15 of the separate instructions. So again, I have a couple examples to help you think through how to report in this question. Example number 1. You, a LAV-funded attorney, represent a victim in a divorce that goes to trial. The final divorce decree addresses child support, custody, visitation, and spousal support. You would report this court decision as an outcome for the categories of divorce, child spousal support, and custody visitation, since the court issued a decision as a result of a trial. You would report only the highest level outcome under all categories. So example number 2. You provide brief services to a victim whose ex-partner is not complying with the terms of a custody visitation order by making a call to the husband's attorney with whom you negotiated the original order. 3 weeks later, the victim is back in your office and tells you that things have gotten worse. You file a motion to modify and are successful in negotiating a change in the terms to have a third party involved in the drop-off and pickup of the children. You consider this matter resolved. You would report this outcome as negotiated resolution filed action under custody visitation. This was the highest level of outcome, and you reported it at the point when the matter had been resolved. Okay, so moving on, question 31 is, again, optional additional information question. And then for question 32, this is where you report the number of pro bono attorneys who have been recruited, trained, mentored, or coordinated with your LAV program funds during the current reporting period. Mentoring includes providing support and advice about a particular case that the pro bono attorney is handling for the purpose of ensuring competent, informed, and successful representation. Also, report how many cases have been accepted and completed by pro bono attorneys during the current reporting period. If a pro bono attorney is closely supervised and or mentored by an LAV-funded attorney on an individual case level, you may report victim served, activities, issues, and outcomes in the preceding questions for the cases the pro bono attorney is handling. Question 33 is where you report the total number of law students who have been recruited, trained, mentored, or coordinated with your LAV program funds during the current reporting period. Also report how many cases were worked on by law students during the current reporting period. If a law student is closely supervised and or mentored by an LAV-funded attorney on an individual case level, you may report victim served, activities, issues, and outcomes in the preceding questions for the cases the law student handles. Section E, narrative. All grantees must answer question number 34. For this question, report briefly on the status of your LAV program grant goals and objectives as of the end of the current reporting period. Report only on the status of your approved goals and objectives. You should refer to your original grant proposal if you are not sure of your grant's goals and objectives. Question number 35 is for all grantees providing direct legal services. For this question, describe the nature of the outcomes achieved for victim survivors during the current reporting period. For questions 36 and 37, only need to be answered once a year on the report for the January to June reporting period. For question 36, report what you see as the most significant areas of remaining need within your state or service area with regard to increasing victim survivor safety and offender accountability. Question 37 is where you explain what LAV program funding has allowed you to do that you could not do prior to receiving this funding. When answering this question, be as specific as possible. Questions 38 and 39 are optional. For question 38, provide additional information regarding the effectiveness of your grant-funded program that was not captured elsewhere on the form. For question 39, finally, provide any additional information that you would like us to know about the data you submitted. If there were any issues or irregularities in the data you reported in previous sections of the form, provide explanations that will help us understand the data. We look at this question before reviewing any other part of the report. For example, if you didn't hire staff until the last 2 months of your first reporting period, or if you are modifying your database and were not able to provide complete data in this report. Also use question 39 to explain how you handled your data if you have submitted 2 separate reports for different parts of the same reporting period. Once the form is completed, you must go to the last page of the form and click the validation button. The validation process will highlight any missing or incomplete information and ask whether you wish to return to this section to review or change the data. When this happens, you may see one of 2 warning messages. One type is a validation error message with a red X. If you receive this type of message, it means you are missing some of the required information. If you want to fix this error now, click Yes, and it will bring you back to that exact question on the form. If not, click No, and continue with validation. Note, you will not be able to complete the validation process until you fix a validation error. The second type of warning is a reminder with a yellow exclamation point. This type of message indicates that something on the form looks like it may be incorrect. You do not have to make a correction to the form to successfully validate when you get this message. If you want to review the field, click Yes, and it will bring you back to that exact question on the form. If not, click No and continue with the validation process. After correcting or completing missing information, return to the bottom of the form and press Validate until all sections of the form are complete. You will receive a third warning message, which is not a warning at all, but validation success. At this point, your form has been successfully validated and is ready for you to submit through GMS. So, this is another reminder to please use Muskie's VAWA MEI website for the following information to help you with your progress report. These are the products and information you can consistently find on our website. We also post important updates and notification letters from OVW regarding important requirements for new grant programs as the progress reporting forms become available for those programs. And this last slide here is our contact information as well as the other resources that are available to you. So if you have any questions as you are filling out the reporting form, please feel free to call or email Muskie's VAWA MEI team, your program specialist, or GMS. That contact information is provided here on the slide. I just want to say thank you again for listening to our training. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. And I hope that you have great success filling out your form.